Oak Tree Square is haunted. Sitting just south of Duncan Park, the quiet residential street has played host to two separate poltergeist events, some 14 years apart. In September 1958, coal merchant James Forsyth petitioned the town council to take his children into temporary care, so terrified were they of remaining in their house at number 17. Footsteps, tapping, scuffling, and the slamming of doors had kept the occupants of the house awake all night for weeks, before an escalation in activity saw furniture moving of its own accord and locked windows springing open. When visited by the Fife Free Press, Mrs. Forsyth sat sobbing in her front room, petrified into never taking off her winter coat, never knowing when she might have to flee the house. And by the first week of October, the Forsyths had abandoned their home in Oak Tree Square altogether, never to return. And so things settled, seemingly, until November 1972, when the paranormal reared its head again, right next door. Mr. Shankar Ram was summoned from his night shift as a linoleum worker at Nairns after his wife and their 5 children had run screaming from number 18 into the street after being overcome by an inexplicable force while watching television. The Rams sought refuge in the home of neighbour Linda Walker, but in short order she too was overtaken by a choking sensation that she likened to breathing through a ball of cotton wool. Arriving back from Nairns at midnight, Mr. Ram immediately bundled his family into a taxi and headed for Glasgow, vowing never to return to what he called the bad house. But what lay behind the terror on Oak Tree Square? Was it, as the council thought, a build-up of static electricity? Was it long-forgotten workings from the panny pit that lie under the street? Or perhaps the Forsyths and the Rams were haunted by the thought of letting Stuart Bannigan wander unchallenged through their midfield and then needlessly chucking away a penalty just 20 minutes later. This is the Oh No 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 podcast, and we are here to talk about yesterday's nightmare on Pratt Street. I am Duncan Cameron, and a couple of weeks short of Halloween, I'm joined tonight by Robbie Weir, first of all. How are you, Robbie?
Firstly, one take, tremendous, brilliant. I feel like you've just absolutely. I really hope this person doesn't listen to the podcast if they live in that house. Just that fear that the house prices is just going to go down. Also, how do you know what breathing through cotton wool is an experience? How do you come across that? Regardless,
I thought that was like a really tangible description. Like when I read that, I was like, that does sound scary. Like you can kind of sort of
feel that.
Yeah, that's scary stuff.
I don't know, but what I can feel is a bit of rage, a bit of frustration. Certainly, Steve Clarke's Scotland didn't do much to. I'd sort of calmed down, and then I watched the game against Belarus there, and that just reignited a bit of fury within myself. And I just Riverside felt like it was taking the piss a bit when I came on, because it comes on and it says, sort of gives you that wee disclaimer. It's like putting your name, is your webcam working, is your mic working, and it comes up and it says, we hope you enjoy your recording. Riverside, we're not going to have fun with this one.
No, I really don't think we are. But also joining us, hot on the heels of a strong debut, we've got Greg Brown as well. How are you, Greg?
Grand, thanks. Yeah, just I thought it was just about over yesterday. I was sticking to the lifelong mantra of it's just a game, and then watch the highlights for coming on and then grab it all over again. So,
yeah, I think I can't see that mood being lifted at any point over the course of this discussion. I think this might be a walloway one, given what we saw yesterday. Which, I mean, to be fair, only finished 2-0, but I've seen us on the end of much heavier scorelines and not felt quite as scunnered, I suppose. Let's not waste any more time. Let's just dive into it. So, one change from last week, Paul McMullen coming back in for Kai Montague. But rather than doing what we normally do, rather than kind of starting with the lineup and systems and all that kind of stuff, let's just run kind of straight into the events of the game. And I don't think we need to kind of pick through the kind of half chances tonight. We'll cover the main ones and then have a bit of a kind of general chat on where things went wrong, because I think there's kind of fertile ground there that'll keep us busy enough for this episode. 12 minutes into the game, and we get the first goal. Stuart Bannigan dropping out of midfield to take the ball off his defence, turning around and very much not ghosting through the midfield, just ambling kind of 25 yards without any kind of resistance before knocking the ball onto Jamie Murphy. He's still got time as well to kind of thread a pass through for Marco Roos to run onto, and he squares for Mark McKenzie to knock the ball into the goal. Robbie, how do you start to make sense of this one?
Yeah, it kind of comes in acts, doesn't it? So you start off with the ball coming to Bannigan, and Easton's there, and Dylan Easton, obviously not renowned for his defensive work as such, he still puts in a shift, but sort of Bannigan jets off and he starts, and then you see Scott Brown sort of tracking across. He's keeping tabs on Jamie Murphy, so he doesn't want to lose Jamie Murphy, but by the same token, you're kind of hoping that he'll maybe come and sort of snuff things out before anything starts building. Ball comes into Murphy, and then it just felt a bit half-hearted, didn't it? It was just kind of everyone in the South Stand that was watching it was just a bit, right, okay, they're coming closer and closer and closer. Surely someone's going to step out and do something about this. And then just nobody did. J-Row gets done on an overlap. And from there on in, it's cut right into Mark McKenzie, who's admittedly in a great run of form. But when you make it that easy for them, certainly from a fan's perspective, it's another goal to his tally, and he deserved it. Ayr deserved the win, certainly because we were absolutely powder puff. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, it's a kind of, they talk about really good players picking up the half spaces. There's not really any half spaces in there. There's quite a lot of full spaces as that kind of develops. I think in particular, like I think that Scott Brown, I think it needs to be kind of snapping into Stuart Bannigan earlier, but he delays kind of long. He's worried about Jamie Murphy, and I suppose in hindsight you could say rightfully so with the way that it develops. But he waits that kind of half second too long, that by the time he does kind of step across to cover Bannigan, Doherty feels like he needs to try and cover Murphy, but he's never close enough. Yep. So he steps into effectively no man's land as well, and that then leaves the space that's in behind. Greg, are you prepared to kind of point the finger at a chief culprit here, or is this an across the board?
So this is one I watched back for my sins quite a few times on the highlights earlier, and initially I want to think that Easton could and should put that initial pressure on Bannigan. I think it is his bag to hold at that point. Once Bannigan starts to advance, though, I agree with you. I think it's Brown that's got to come. Brown and Matthews are parallel in terms of their positioning. I know there's been some chat about, well, that's the way the formation's set up, that one of them going forward leaves that gap. Well, aye, that's kind of the point. But let's not forget that they've been working on this not only all week, but for weeks. This is a formation that Robson is kind of committing to, and it's a bit naive at best to say, well, nobody's really sure who should be picking up Bannigan. And then you look at the next phase, because you're absolutely right. Then when the ball is played through, Rose passed inside far too easily, given that he's the wing back there. He's so passive. The ball's past him. He's on the turn. He's no chance of getting back. Doherty's picked up on that, so Doherty's then filed out, which then pulls Fordyce out because he has to cover that space. Hanlon's then got no chance. He's snookered. He can at best do what he does, which is to try and kind of make out himself a pest. For me, it's maybe unfair, but it's Brown. It's where I would be pointing the finger. Individuals in that sequence can maybe do a bit better in terms of marginal gains, but for me, it's Brown's got to come right at the traps there and close that space.
Yeah, Scott Brown was at the time, I was very firmly in the that is entirely Scott Brown's fault.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, we'll get to the second goal, where some of these thoughts might recur. I think it is more. There's more to it than that, but I don't think it almost doesn't offer a reprieve to Scott Brown. It just kind of damns others as well. But I think it's, and don't get me wrong, this is going to be the theme of this episode. I think it's systemic. I think it's down to the way they've been set up. But to your point there about Easton, so Easton goes, and listen, it's not pressing, to the nth degree, but he is nominally kind of pressing the defender who has the ball. And when the pass goes, and it's a very short pass, but it goes behind him to Bannigan, almost cartoonishly, you can see in the highlights, he turns around and is like, oh, why don't I have a teammate there? And he kind of puts his hands out as if to go, like, who's there? And then, to be fair, goes. But it's all like it's too late, effectively.
Because almost similarly after, he then sees Scott Brown, he moves off Murphy, and he's kind of pointing for someone else to fill the space. And you're a bit like, but nobody goes. Who's there?
It's exactly the same thing. And then it happens a third time with Rowe, because Rowe's thinking, I'm in a back five. So when this ball gets cut in, if it's cut in sort of, on my left-hand side as I'm turning, Docherty's going to be there. He's going to be in that. That gap isn't going to exist. But because Doherty stepped out, because Brown has moved across, and again, you see that where Rowe turns, and I think he thinks he's turning into, effectively, Jordan Doherty putting his foot on the ball, and he realises there's space there, and Roos has already got the afterburners on and just steams right past them. And that's what I mean about it. It's a kind of failing across the board.
Yeah.
And it's not... it's not as simple as just, you need to step up. It's more like, as you said there, Greg, this is a system they've been playing and working on for a long time. And not without criticism. Like, that's the stuff that you should at least be familiar with now.
And actually, the on that point specifically, the personnel of Brown, Matthews, Easton, Rowe, you can maybe cut some slack because come the start of the season he dropped out. The team, Mullen was in, so he, I think, gets maybe more of a free pass here. For everybody else in that conversation, they are playing week in, week out, and okay, there's maybe changes to the formation that they have to then compensate for. But in that structure, that's where they're playing. That's where they've been playing all season. So actually, you can't really do anything other than be incredibly frustrated that it's been so passive and so easy for Bannigan to put it through at Murphy, etc. It's schoolboy stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It's. I think the frustration for me is, surely, if you're going to play Matthews and Brown together, right? And listen, we've all had literally hours worth of audio on this now. I don't think we need to necessarily retread over the kind of key points on how we, I think, all feel about that. But surely the advantage of that, or the reason you would do that, is the kind of all-action nature of the midfield.
100%.
And it's just not in effect for that goal. Like, that should be the kind of goal where you go, well, at least we're not going to concede goals like that. Because anytime the ball's in the middle of the park, we have two guys snapping into those challenges. But I think it's basically as simple as Ayr played a three-man midfield and we played a two, broadly. Like, it's because the thing is, as that goal develops and they've gone kind of along that left-hand side, standing watching it the entire time is Ben Dempsey, who's actually like an entirely alternative option that Ayr could have used because he's also free. I don't. It feels like the kind of goal a team with 10 men would concede. Where you just lose one runner once, and you don't have the numbers to make it up, and you're 10 minutes in the game. You
mentioned it in our group chat though yesterday about how with the system that we're playing and the style that we're playing, like, it's almost counterintuitive to be so direct with a 3-5-2 style with two wing backs, because you're really not getting the best out of anyone by doing it. And again, we'll come back to this later on. But with the way that we have set up, because of Brown and Matthews, it's kind of the both sort of, neither of them's really an out-and-out number 6. And again, it's Sean Byrne, the point's been done to death. Probably doesn't even really need to be spoken about at this point, because we saw it when he came on. But regardless, he's an expert in that field. And while he's not going to be sort of Claude Makelele by any stretch of the imagination, we know what we're getting there. And I feel with the way that the build up for that goal, I don't know if it changes necessarily if Sean Byrne's in the team, but I feel like there's far less of a chance, because that way you can just have a bit more of a bombing rather than a sort of finger pointing in terms of going about the pitch, putting in tackles from your sort of number 8.
Yeah, I think, and listen, it's easy to say this, right? Because there is obviously no evidence for it, so we can just make hypothetical situations that fit our argument, and then feel pleased with ourselves for doing it. But it does feel like if that same move develops and your partnership is either Byrne and Matthews or Byrne and Brown, let's call it Byrne and Brown for the sake of the simplicity in this. I think Brown's starting point is 10 yards further up the park.
Mm-hmm.
So when Bannigan receives that pass that's bypassed Easton, he's turning into Brown rather than turning into space.
Yeah.
And then as that move develops, you've got, and it's not necessarily, it's not that like either Brown or Matthews can't do these things. Again, sorry, I know we've done this to death, but I think it's a confusion in the role. And it's a natural who goes where. Talked about it before. If you've got like a big man, little man strike partnership and the ball gets lumped up the park, innately they each know which one is going to go and challenge for it and which one is going to compete for the flick on. It's that same thing in a midfield. And I just think with Brown and Matthews, they're just naturally inclined to do the same thing, and so they're having to think harder than they should as moves like that develop. But even at that, I think it's almost kind of criminal beyond that. I think they should still both be good enough, and the rest of the team should be good enough to prevent that goal from happening.
I think it's maybe as well less about the personnel as such, actually, to give Brown and Matthews a bit of a reprieve, because if Byrne's in there, maybe the same thing does actually pan out. But it's 10 minutes into the game. You know, it's not like it's in the opening 60 seconds, 100, where Ayr haven't really settled into what. It's 10 minutes in. Brown and Matthews have had a bit of time to suss out how Ayr are setting up shop and how that's likely to pan out. Like, these are guys, they're professional footballers with a wealth of experience between them. And I've used the phrase already about naivety. That's what it is. It's no seeing the game as it plays out in front of you, and it's switching off for a couple of seconds, and it's a couple of seconds that is all Bannigan and Ayr need to make it count.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep going at a bit of pace through the kind of games. I think there's overarching points in this that I think we'll come back to. We'll kind of run through. So the next couple of kind of moments I want to look at is, I mean, there's 2 free kicks for the Rovers. So Easton shoots for the first, and it's not a million miles away, but it's comfortably over the bar. And then the next one is kind of whipped in, and J. Rowe gets his head on it, but it is more or less straight at David Mitchell. Really, the reason I wanted to call out those two is because I think that's about as good as it got for the Rovers in the first half. Unless there's anything that I've kind of glossed over. Robbie, first of all, feel free to disagree with me if you like on that, but if it is the case that those 2 free kicks are about as good as it got, is that in and of itself a bit of a damning indictment of the way this team is performing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Like yesterday, we just didn't really do enough. Barry Robson in his post-match up in Dingwall talked quite a lot about how we had the opportunities to get points from that game, and you can kind of nod your head and say, yeah, that makes sense. And Blair touched on it in the pre-match podcast that when we've gone down and we've lost games, we've gone down fighting. And there's always been that aspect of, if Jack Hamilton sinks the chance at the near post at Partick Thistle away, we're potentially going on and winning the game or drawing it. Even last week, Josh Gentles was the one that was cleared off the line. We had multiple attempts cleared off the line. nowhere remotely close to that yesterday. It was an exceptionally pedestrian performance from Rovers, which does in itself raise quite a lot of questions, I think, going forward. And just really disappointing, I would say, to lose, to put in that. Ayr, of course, are a decent team. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination you would call them world beaters. I don't think any team in this league are. But at the same time, they fully deserved their win yesterday. They're in a good reign of form now. Scott Brown's done well to turn that around. Obviously, I've been quite critical myself of them in terms of how they'd started the season, got a few players back. We in turn have started to miss a few players, but even then, I think with the players that we had available, we should be doing a lot better than how we performed yesterday.
Yeah, I think Ayr United, maybe this is kind of damning them with faint praise, I don't know, but they just look like a team who all knew their jobs in a really good way. You know, that there was very little that, you know, kind of miscommunication, or even if you think back to the first game of the season, the goal that we score, there's kind of bit of messing about between the defence and the goalkeeper, and in the end the goalkeeper makes the error before Easton lobs him. There didn't seem to be any of that. You know, they looked like a team that's grown into the season and got some players back. And it won't surprise you to learn that at one point I was writing a very tortured intro that included a lot of horror film titles, and the one that I had there was that at a certain point it was Child's Play for Ayr United. And, you know, I didn't take it out because it was inaccurate. I took it out because the intro was already 7 minutes long. Greg, in terms of these two kind of free kicks, I mean, you've got to get up the park, I suppose, to win them. But, I mean, like Robbie, just disappointed that the Rovers weren't able to kind of fashion more from open play.
Yeah, definitely. And even to stick with the two free kicks, I think it's concerning that for all that a lot of the goals this season and under Robson typically come directly or indirectly from set plays, there's not really much in the way of creativity there. I mean, Rowe actually does really well with his run from his starting position to where he then gets the free header. And you could argue he can maybe do a bit better with that, but out with those free kicks, there's really nothing. Hamilton, for the most part, is too deep, and I'm not quite sure why, because the ball wasn't coming into his feet. McMullen, there was no attempt from McMullen, to my eye, to take the ball into possession and take it in control and turn and utilise pace. It was just attempts to flick it over him and flick it over the defender, more often than not to nobody. But for me, the big concern is the build-up play is so slow, so ponderous. There's no urgency at getting forward, and when you're then from one play to the next seemingly switching from hoofing it up the park to kind of nobody, or putting it into a channel, but then nobody's quite running into that channel and it's not going into feet. What are we doing? But because we're not going to fashion chances in open play, playing football like that. Really, really concerning yesterday. And I think over the piece, and actually what I thought yesterday, and I haven't changed my mind, is, you know, when German teams, right, at the end of pre-season, they play a game where they know they're going to win like 10-0, and it's just about building confidence and running through the motions. That's how Ayr played, and obviously the scoreline wasn't anywhere near that, and it didn't come close to that. But my point is, Ayr were just allowed to run like a well-oiled machine. And I said at the time that Scott Brown could well have come off the park there and said in his post-match interview, you know, that was really useful for us because it allowed us individually to do what we need to be doing, and we did it well. And it for every bit of the game, felt like a pre-season game that Ayr had handpicked for that very purpose.
I thought you were going to say there that if we'd played one of these village teams, we'd get beat. Just to kind of expand on a point you made there about being kind of ponderous, it feels like to me the Rovers yesterday, they're kind of ponderous up to a point, and then it just switches completely. And it's like nobody takes two touches. Everything's all... And so the free kick that McMullen wins, the one that Easton shoots from, is a relatively good example of that, because the ball kind of comes down in the midfield and Scott Brown, rather than controlling it, basically runs onto it and just knocks it on to Easton, who knocks it on to McMullen, who then is running in. And, I mean, if he's not fouled, that might actually end up being the best kind of chance that we get. But it felt like, you alluded to this already, first kind of half hour, it felt like every time the ball got near Paul McMullen, he was trying to kind of backheel it around the corner.
Yeah.
Like, it was like the idea was, like, don't let them breathe, don't let them think, just be on them, be on top of them. And that was how we started the season. That's kind of how we were in pre-season. And again, we've seen it, we saw it with the high press early in the season, and we got the goal against Dunfermline, but like, the rest of that seems to have fallen away a bit. We don't seem to be doing it to the same degree. And the impression it gives off ends up just being a bit kind of, I don't know, maybe even chaotic is a bit kind. Chaotic seems to be that, like, sometimes it goes for you, sometimes it doesn't. It just seems a bit unorganised and a bit kind of messy.
Uncontrolled.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so I remember talking about this in the post-match after we drew with Airdrie, saying it felt like we weren't giving ourselves the best chance to play to our own strengths. Like, we almost weren't showing our own team enough respect, and we were trying to play for knockdowns and 50-50s, and if you just create enough of these, the ball could go anywhere chances, it might go in the goal at some point. Whereas we've got good players and we don't seem to be actually using them very much. Like, how often can you picture from 90 minutes yesterday Scott Brown or Ross Matthews putting their foot on the ball? Like, it just doesn't really happen. And it's not really their game, but
John Byrne comes on, you see it almost immediately, and that kind of, it just justifies your biases of being like, well, he should be playing, just get him on the pitch because this is what he does. I think you're absolutely right, though. It's a real damning indictment of this. Like, I don't think there's a lack of belief in the squad. It's just how we're using the squad and being able to put them on the pitch. And I think in the year 2025, you shouldn't be sitting there saying, well, what we're going to do is we're going to get the ball, and we've got Paul Hanlon, and we've got Callum Fordyce and Jordan Doherty. Jordan Doherty, really good at bringing the ball at the back. Callum Fordyce, really good at finding passes at the back.
Yeah.
But with our two wing backs, what we're going to do, we're just going to ignore that. We're going to play it long, and we're going to play for a flick on. Paul McMullen's potentially going to get to that, and then he'll try and hook it around the corner to wing backs that are still in our half of the pitch. And you're thinking, what? Why? What's going on there? Like, and individually, like, I feel like yesterday was quite probably Scott Brown's worst game in a Rovers shirt. And I'm sure that he would happily hold his hands up and say, look, yesterday, just not at the races. Scott Brown's got a lot of credit in the bank. Some of the players don't have the credit in the bank, and I think that's an issue in itself. Particularly Wilson and Rowe, who are obviously new into the club. And we don't have the sort of same level there that we do with Scott Brown. But also as well, you've got to ask the question of whether these players are being utilised in the right way to get the best out of them. Certainly with Jay Rowe. Just, if we're going to be going direct and we're going to be chipping balls out to him to try and knock on with his head, like, is that really where we should be utilising his aerial strengths? I think there's some big questions to be asked there.
In the pre-match, which I listened to, it was very good, Blair made a really interesting point about why Barry Robson picks Scott Brown and Ross Matthews. I thought it was really interesting. I think he was kind of struggling to define exactly what he was trying to say, and I was like there with him as he was saying it. I was like, no, I get this point, but I also don't quite know how to articulate it. So I'm about to try again, and I'll mangle it, I'm sure. But he was kind of like, it's almost like a sort of fixation on a specific attribute that they will give you. And it's like, that's, Barry Robson's, when he first came in, he talked a lot about like his non-negotiables.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, but through a different lens, where it's like, what I am going to get from them, without question, is this engine, this sort of drive that I want. And it's like, well, that, I cannot do without that. So I have to have that. Now let's almost kind of work around it, and let's just see what else we can build around that. I kind of feel like it's the same thing with J-Rowe and his height, where he's looking at it, probably the team as a whole, and maybe it's a response to the fact that we don't create too many chances. And he's going, well, actually, if I can get a guy who, I mean, you see him in our box, in the opposition's box. J-Rowe gets first contact on set pieces a lot. But it feels to me where it is just a case of he's gone, I want that guy on the park winning headers in both boxes. And then he's almost like retrofitting the rest of it around that. But it doesn't really... Almost like he hasn't gone to enough effort to really gel it all together.
But also, if he does want that, it doesn't reconcile. Why was Rowe out in the cold for so long at the start of the season? You know, that's just one of this unanswered quandary at the minute. Is he clearly likes Mullen, we all do, but the idea that Mullen has come in, hasn't really put a foot wrong in this system, being played out of position. And okay, the red card then has facilitated a change, and he's kind of then brought Rowe back in. And I get your point. It's like he sees something in Rowe that he wants on the park, which he saw in pre-season and the League Cup. But then when you get to the start of the league campaign, like dropped him like a hot toddy. There's nowhere near the team. So my concern is that Robson maybe publicly knows what he wants. I think he's racked with a lot of indecision about how he's going to get what he wants and how it actually looks on the park.
But see, with coming back to the systems, it's like we played this sort of 3-4-3 almost in the League Cup, and we've kind of almost gone back to that in a sense at the moment. It's a bit like with a player where, like, you have a player, they're playing fine, it's working okay, they make a mistake, they drop out the team for a wee bit, and then they get replaced, and then maybe 6 or 7 games later, they come back out the team and someone else replaces. You switch back to what you were doing before. Kind of feels a bit like that in a sense that switch it with a player, but with a formation, because we've gone back to this formation that we were using in the League Cup. We saw it in the East Kilbride game. We saw it where East Kilbride were breaking free at will, and Matthews and Brown just couldn't cover the same ground because of the exposure and us having basically an extra player at centre-back. So, it really, really raises questions yesterday about why we're going back to this system that's kind of failed us before.
Yeah, it does. I think let's come back to the system stuff, because I think I want to kind of talk about that as a whole, kind of the way it looked by the end of the game. There's a lot to talk about there, so we'll come back to that. Just to get back to the game effectively. So actually the second goal comes from... it's Paul McMullen trying to kind of flick the ball around the corner again, where he catches Scott McMahon. I think this is a foul. I think you could make the argument that it's not, looking at it back. Like, it's one of these where Paul McMullen doesn't know that Scott McMahon's coming because he's coming from behind them. But at the same time, you can't really just fling your boot out.
Yeah, it's very cheap.
And you hit somebody who's coming in from behind you because you're flailing a leg out at every opportunity. I think you're liable to give away free kicks. But, I mean, you've got a free kick 45 yards out. It's not the end of the world. Shouldn't be. Stuart Bannigan, our old pal, then just kind of chips this free kick into the wide open space on the right-hand side of the box as the defence looks at it. And Scott McMahon goes chasing after the ball, but really, before he can really even get there, Scott Brown runs into the back of him, really. Greg, are you prepared to offer any kind of case for the defence here for Scott Brown, for your client?
In a word, no.
Take the plea.
What I've actually got written down is 2 words, actually. Stupid and madness. Because... And this is the thing, it's not even like the free kick is whipped in and they've got limited... It's as you say, it's chipped in, it's floated in. McMahon makes the run, and Brown just kind of is torn between watching the flight of the ball and trying to keep an eye on who's then running in. And it's a stone wall of penalties you're going to see. And I think at that point, I think if he could have taken himself off the park, he would have done. Brown knows exactly he wasn't having the best of times there, but there's no defence for it.
Robbie, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I shouted never when I was in the stand, but at the same time, like, I like straight away, I was like, nah, I'm completely in the wrong about that. But yeah, he's just, it's the most frustrating thing is that there's absolutely no danger that's coming out of the back of where the ball's going. It's going wide to goal. We could just shepherd the player wide, and they'll probably recycle the ball and chuck it in again, but at least you've got a good chance of clearing that. Whereas Brown just clatters into the back of him. It's a clear penalty.
Do you think Scott Brown knows that Scott McMahon's there? Do you think he sees him before he clatters into the back?
Not until it's too late.
I don't think he does either. I don't think he looks.
I think he's still got to have awareness, though. That's the thing.
Well, this is the thing. Like the angle on the highlights, it's not quite a kind of wide enough shot to see the starting position, but my kind of recollection live is that Scott Brown's kind of caught cold.
Mm-hmm.
I think he kind of realises, like, oh, this ball's been chipped into that space. I wasn't expecting that. And just chases the ball. And I don't think at any point does he actually just look over his shoulder to see, like, who is coming and where is he?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost at the point where he goes to look, he's suddenly, McMahon's come from his blind spot and he just runs into the back of him. And that's, I mean, it's, as you say, it is as clear a penalty as you'll see because he just runs into the back of him. And I think Scott McMahon is probably a little bit surprised that he's been fouled there because, as you say, Robbie, it's not. I think the best he can do there is kind of hook it back across the goal, but there's no pace on the ball, so he's going to have to really just like off balance. Swing his left boot at that and hope it clatters into the bodies, or probably more likely with his right foot just shepherd it back out onto the wing and kind of go again for a second phase. So it's really frustrating in that sense, and the sort of potential danger versus the cost of conceding the penalty is way out of whack.
What I actually thought was the more interesting point from the highlights was both. Don't know if you've noticed this, but Matthews and Hanlon, Murphy's stuttering his run up and effectively stops during it, and they both point that out to the referee. Obviously, it's not one that's going to get ever called out unless the referee's going to be in a very, egregious mode, shall we say? But just one to note there.
I think. Do not quote me on this. I believe the current rule on that is you can't stop in the act of kicking the ball, but you can beforehand.
Yeah.
So the fact that Murphy kind of takes 2 steps, stops, takes 2 steps and kicks the ball is fine. But if he takes 4 steps, stops, waits and keeper moves, and then he hits it, I think that would be an issue. It's a very good penalty. We'll say that.
Yeah.
I think Josh Ray gets about as close as you could reasonably expect. And very good hit. I mean, really, I think that kind of takes us through to half time. There's still plenty of football to be played, but it's not an awful lot happened in it. I think the only thing I would say to that is the general tone of the game felt like it was still in Ayer's favour. Going into the second half, again, I'm going to skip right over the kind of subs and the system stuff. We'll come back to at the end. There's a claim for a handball in the highlights. Not convinced. Didn't think so at the time. Still don't think so. I'm not even going to give you a chance to argue me on that because it's very quickly followed by a break from Ayr United. Jamie Murphy, again involved in this one, puts a great ball across for Ethan Walker, who doesn't have to break stride, but takes it slightly oddly and hits the bar. Robbie, do you think Ethan Walker should really be doing better putting this game to bed at that point?
Yeah, I mean, with the chance itself, when I saw it in real time, I thought, he's absolutely done it. And put over the bar, and then when you see it carrying off, you're a bit like, oh wow. Just he looking from the angles of the south stand,
he almost takes it so badly that he's done really well to still hit the bar.
Yeah,
like it's a weird kind of technique that he goes for.
But to go back to it, at that point, you're just thinking, because that really would be game dead and buried. Not that we were going to end up doing much in the second half, but to just get cut open so easily, it's just not great to see. But yeah, just quite insipid, shall we say?
I think that's certainly that's the best chance of the half.
Yeah.
There is a Rovers. I'm really going to skip over the second half. There's a Rovers chance kind of towards the end where Easton volleys wide after David Mitchell doesn't quite get a punch onto Jordan Doherty's cross. Other than that, though, I mean, the half chances that we're skipping over, it's kind of 3-1, 4-1 in terms of Ayr United. I think it really would have been, if that Easton chance goes in, it obviously totally changes the game, and then the last 10 minutes or whatever would have been very interesting, but it would have been a kind of Scotland-Greece type kind of smash and grab where suddenly the dynamic of the game changes, having been effectively kind of one-way traffic the whole way through. And I think these are the kind of chances that, as we saw at Dingwall, we kind of need to 4 or 5 of those at the moment to get one of them to go in. And I mean, we basically had 2 half chances in that game. We're not playing well enough to kind of earn goals out of that. I mean, is there, Greg, anything to be said for that second half? Really, in terms of the pattern of the game, was that just Ayr?
I mean,
really having their own way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unique to the game on Saturday, but Ayr are 2-0 up, they're cruising. They don't have to do anything. It's not the kind of typical a team goes into the lead and then kind of sits back. Ayr continued to just go through the motions. They were very confident in their own plan and what they were doing. And if it didn't quite pan out, they lost possession. It was just a confidence of, listen, we're going to get the ball back in a couple of phases anyway. It's not going to matter. And it was just then a case of going again. And there was a real, and it was present in the first half, but even despite the subs, which again, we'll come on to formations and maybe subs in a wee while, but continued to be a real lack of belief in the Rovers side, which was very evident. And Ayr were just happy to go again and again and again and just keep probing, but with no real urgency. They didn't need to do anything at that point.
This is they talk about 2-0 is the most dangerous scoreline. You wouldn't think so on that evidence there. That's just really a case of right, we're 2-0 up. We're not going to take any chances. Right. What have you got? And none. Really was the answer there.
As infuriating as it was when you're sitting watching it in the stand, it was a lesson in game management, really.
Yeah.
Ayr did exactly what they needed to do. You had players going down exactly the right point. If any sort of break in play when we were going forward, we saw it a few times. There was one where straight away the ball goes down. Murphy, I think, goes down for a head knock when we break through. And then that was more consistent in the second half. You're playing to the rules of the game, and they were very, very good at it. They deserve a bit of credit for that, because that's what's going to see out wins, and it takes away opportunities from other clubs. So fair play to them for it. As infuriating as it is, but hopefully we can do it back to them at some point in the future.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I thought it was textbook game management. I don't think there's even really anything the referee can do about it. It's just that's what you would want your team to do in the same situation. So certainly I'm not going to
just really basic things like your sub tries to walk off on the main stand side and takes about 10 steps, and the referee's screaming at him to go off on the far side, and then he kind of diverts his run, so he walks along the sort of halfway line, and then he just curves off like he's going to make a run down the wing. Really, really good from their perspective, I guess. Terrible from Marsh, but
yeah, not the only thing. Let's talk about some of this more slightly kind of global stuff for this, because it's not just this game. I think yesterday was a lot of stuff we've been talking about kind of in effect, really, in the most kind of stark sense that it has been. And I don't want anybody to think that we are sitting here going oh, we told you so, as if we are clever and, saw this coming. Obviously that's not the case, and it's not what we're doing. But I think it would be disingenuous not to kind of ask some of the questions we're about to ask about the manager and his approach and his decision making, really. Because this is really the reason why I wanted to kind of go through the game relatively quickly in terms of its incidents, because I think they're obviously quite player focused.
Mm-hmm.
But that, to me, and obviously I'll get your thoughts in a second, felt more like a management based defeat. You know what I mean? I don't think the players were sent out with the best platform. And as we said, in each of the goals, there's very clear individual errors, but I don't think the players were sent out with the best kind of baseline in which to perform from. So a couple of different points on this kind of theme. So the first thing, as we said, kind of system-wise, 3 different, kind of starkly different formations across this game. So for the first half, you can call it either, a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, depending on how you want to draw your lines. But very clearly, the back 3 and the wing backs, and then you've got Hamilton supported by Easton and McMullen. He then changes at half-time, changes to a formation I don't think we've seen Barry Robson use before. That kind of 4-4-2 with a diamond midfield, really. So he's still got Brown and Matthews in there, but he's added Jordan Doherty as a kind of sitting midfielder, which I think we've all known he can do that. He's certainly not done it an awful lot for us. And Kai Montague had come off the bench to go to the kind of tip of that midfield. But that only lasts about 15 minutes before Josh Mullen comes on for Jay Rowe. And at that point, again, certainly to my eyes anyway, he switches to a kind of 4-2-3-1. So Jordan Doherty's now back out the midfield, back into defence to go and play right back. Josh Mullen comes on to go on the right wing. Dylan Easton drops out of the forward line to play left wing. And Robbie, as an overarching point, is that a concern for you that the manager feels like he has to, change the system twice in the same game? Or is that a strength, that level of adaptability?
I don't know if I would go so far as saying it was a strength, but just kind of wishing he was a bit more Neil Collinsy yesterday, in the sense of, we got to half time, make your changes then. And he brings on Kai Montague, which is fine, and Kai's very talented, admittedly still quite raw player, because he's maybe not had the exposure to the game that across last season that we might have hoped. But yeah, it was just kind of felt like we were going through the motions and that we didn't really commit to anything in particular, which was probably a fair summary of where we were yesterday afternoon. It just felt like we were out of ideas and just lacking in belief in what we were trying to do.
So for the last kind of 20 minutes, so that 4-2-3-1, as he came in after about the hour mark, 10 minutes into that, he made a triple substitution. So it was like for like subs. It was still the 4-2-3-1. Callum Smith came on for Jack Hamilton. Sean Byrne came on for Scott Brown. And Lewis Stevenson came on for Ewan Wilson. Greg, is there any point in that game where you felt like it looked like it made sense? Any of those particular systems? Did any of them work at any point, do you think?
No, and again, and the caveat to this is I don't know how much of it is Ayr were 2-0 up. And as I discussed earlier, they didn't really have to come out and play. But the style of play from Rovers didn't materially change really from one formation to the next. Montague comes on, he kind of goes into and actually I would quite like to see him play more often in the hole in the field, but nothing's really working for him. He's probably a bit rusty, but the passages of play aren't really tailored to him being there and those chances kind of coming. Then when you're looking at the change to the kind of latter formation that we finished the game with, again, the patterns of play don't change. It's the like-for-like personnel, so there's maybe no reason for it to change wholesale. but the tactical tweaks, there's been 2 of them by that point, haven't materially changed anything. And Neil Collins, Robbie, you mentioned him, changed at half time every week, but we always got better. Like very rarely did we get worse after Collins made his changes, and Robson has made changes. Listen, the point I would really make there is Doherty gets man of the match from the sponsors, and he's played 3 different positions in the game for significant time in each position. If that's not a red flag, I'm not sure what is.
Yeah, this is interesting, the point on Doherty, because I think he's really good, basically, is my main point here. And I feel like we're not using him to the best of his abilities, and he's still getting man of the match. But to go back to the way we started the game, with the back 3 and the wing backs, I feel like there's a fundamental mismatch between the way we play the game and the way we set up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't understand the logic behind it. So the amount of long balls that we play and the amount of direct football that we play, to me, is fundamentally opposed to playing with wingbacks. Like, it feels like it should be one or the other. Because if you're playing with wingbacks, you've got 3 guys in the middle, you're then pushing these 2 guys who are wide further on, and that's how you're going to advance the ball. Either you're going to give it to them and they're going to run it, or you're playing the ball into the middle to then basically put it round the corner for these guys to run onto. But what you're not doing is playing long balls up to your forwards, because your wingbacks are too far back. If you're playing wide forwards, if you've got an Aidan Connolly, for example, is playing on the right-hand side, you can play long balls up to your Jack Hamilton, because Aidan Connolly is on the scene when those balls come down. But as it is with us, I mean, the theory is that McMullen and Easton are going to be there, but they're too... You're too spread apart. You're too... Like, if you're going to do that, if you're going to play these long balls, why not just play a back 4 and then you've got an extra man to use further up the park?
Yeah.
Like, it seems like it should be one or the other. And the thing where I think this is almost counterproductive is Jordan Doherty is... I realise I change the pronunciation of his surname every time I say it. Sorry.
That's it. It's just...
I'm not going to stop, so apologies. He's good enough at right back to offer you an awful lot of what you'd want a wing back to be doing. And I think the perfect example is that chance we mentioned in the second half, where Easton on the kind of half volley goes just wide. It's on his left foot. It's a difficult chance. I should have said that. But that chance comes from someone we talked about last week, which is Callum Fordyce really forcing the ball onto the wing, where Jordan Doherty is on the move, on the run, and he receives that pass on the move and then puts the cross into the box. That never happened in the first half, and we were playing 2 wingbacks.
Yeah.
It was only once we went to the back 4. And this is the thing that I don't understand why we're playing with the wingbacks that we are, as much as anything. And it feels quite harsh on J. Rowe and on Ewan Wilson. Because as you said, Robbie, they're both already, they're kind of nobody's favourite player, put it that way. And it's partly because we have no other body of evidence. We can only judge them on what we've seen them. But I feel like they're not getting a fair shake at it.
Yeah.
Ewan Wilson doesn't look like a wingback. He looks like a fullback. And we're asking him to play in a wingback's jersey. But either, because of the rest of the way we play, doesn't let him really get up that side, or he's just been told not to, or potentially he's not comfortable or good enough to do it. I don't know. But it doesn't feel like, if any of those things are true, why are you doing it?
I think, just to come in there, I think that the style of play that we play is reductive, and it probably reduces the confidence of the players across the board. Like, I mean, you look at Jack Hamilton, for example. Like, if you're getting balls shelled up to you all afternoon and you're trying to flick it onto Paul McMullen and sometimes it works and the ball goes to him and then nobody's up there to support you've got to imagine that after an hour's worth of play, he's probably sitting there saying, well, this isn't fucking working. What are we doing? Like, where are we going? What's happening with this? And it probably is exactly the same in the sense of confidence for the likes of J-Ro. We've seen J-Ro strikes me as the type of player where a Boston United fan is probably sitting there saying, he was fantastic for us last season. Why are they using him like that? Like, what's going on there? And I think this is probably the route where it comes back to Barry Robson. And you divert it back to him and sort of saying, well, where are we going with this? Like, what's the direction? Yeah, I've not been too critical of Barry Robson. Well, I've not really been critical of Barry Robson at all up until this point. And last night, a lot of the discussion on Pine Bovril was, there was a few people that were sort of saying, like, well, we told you that Barry Robson was shite, and you were all happy clapping, and you were all delighted because we were winning games. The ends were kind of justified by the means before because we were winning games, and you can sort of say, like, look, you always hope in that sort of situation that it gets better. Yesterday was by far and away the worst that we've looked under Robson so far, and I think that was probably the first like alarm bell of how much of a distance there was between us and Ayr and the organisation and how well they played. And I don't think, again, to reiterate, I'm not being disrespectful when I say this to Ayr, I don't think they were world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. We just didn't lay a glove on them at all. And that's because of the way that we set up. And I think for the players, it's probably a source of frustration that you're sort of going out, and if you're utilising this style, probably doesn't work for any of them, really.
Yeah, I think the thing I would say for Ayr there is I don't think they got out of second gear. I don't think they had to. Like, that, you know, whether they've got more to give or not, you couldn't really say on yesterday's evidence because they just never had to and never really looked in any danger.
What I would say
Greg,
about... sorry, just a final point on that. So if you look at that chance and you see it in the highlights, and Doherty puts the ball in, he just kind of... It's like he's standing, watching, almost expecting a goal from it. And I honestly don't think that's in what a ball I've just put in there. It's almost like this is what we've been training for. This is what we're doing. And it's almost like when the goal doesn't happen, he hasn't actually moved in that 4, 5, 6 seconds of play. And it's almost like disbelief of these are the chances we're aiming to set out. But my criticism for that isn't then on Easton or any of the players in the box. It actually comes back to Robson, because if that is the way you want to play, you're the manager. Pick the players that are going to allow you to create those chances more regularly. Pick the players that you're seeing them every day in training. Pick the players that you have the confidence are going to put the ball in the back of the net. Pick a formation that you believe is going to facilitate these chances. So it's so counterproductive, counterintuitive for Robson to then be tinkering with formations during a game, chopping and changing starting lineups. And that's a real irony, considering Robson also came under for a lot of flack for sticking with the same lineup week in, week out. And maybe it's a case of he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Maybe it's a case of being unfair on him. But I can't help but feel that, in a nutshell, are the sort of chances that Robson wants to be happening more often. But I do think it's more on him than the players that's not what we're seeing.
This is the thing for me. I'm not seeing a strategy, like a coherent, like even at County last week, as you said, Robbie, we had chances, but they were quite kind of scrappy chances, and I think we've got plenty of good players, and I think we all know the way the Championship is that if you're off it by a couple of percent, you can lose a game. It's something that Sean Byrne said in that brilliant interview that he did, and I thought, that's really true. You see that with, it's if the team that's bottom of the league beats the team that's top of the league in the Championship, nobody falls off their seat. Like, it can happen. And it's almost like even when you're bad, you get beat 2-0 by Ayr United. Like, there's not huge gulfs. But in these games where we've lost narrowly at Dingwall, we've drawn at Airdrie, we drew at Queen's Park at the start of the season, it doesn't feel like we have a really coherent strategy and sometimes it falls short. It feels like we go out there, we try our best, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And like last season, Robson came in, that kind of back end of the season. It's funny that he didn't really win as many plaudits as he probably should have done.
Yeah.
And I don't really mean that. I'm not sort of like criticising people who didn't get on board. More as just an observation. Like it's weird almost that he didn't, because you'd think that basically if you come in and you go 14 games unbeaten, everybody's going to be delighted, almost regardless. But I mean, we said it a couple of times recently. Like it's felt like he's only been two bad results away from quite a bit of flack.
Yep.
And now that we've failed to score in 4 of our last 5 games, like hello, the flack is here.
But what I would caveat this with is that yesterday was an exceptionally bad performance. Like I'm probably termed as one of the happy clappers within our support. I mean, I'm not really too bothered because I don't put too much credence in terms of like, oh, I'm really concerned about what other people are thinking, because everyone's got their own opinions. But for me, yesterday was probably the first of the alarm bell sirens, like going, oh, whoa, what was that? It was, just really, really hapless in the way that we went about our business.
So the thing for me with this is the start of the season. So back end of last season, start of this season, you mentioned it already, like the team that played East Kilbride was the same formation. It was this kind of 3-4-3, 3-5-2, however you want to call it. It is the same thing. We know what we're talking about. The kind of key difference, I think, is that it was Vaughan instead of Hamilton in the front line. But that shouldn't necessarily really change things. But it feels like what's changed since then is that suddenly we're nowhere near as high energy as we were. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is not because I think Jack Hamilton can't do it and Lewis Vaughan can, because I don't think Vaughan's really suited to that either. But it feels like in the East Kilbride game, I think, is the perfect example, because although we get beat, we created loads of chances from being really high energy, really high press. That seems to have disappeared.
Hmm.
And if you think about a lot of the goals that Finlay Pollock scored for us, it was that turn the ball over, put it through. He's lightning quick, so we'll get there. And it's a bit like, we don't have anybody who's lightning quick, but we've not really come up with an alternative. We've just stopped doing, there's no point doing that, because there's nobody lightning quick to knock the ball onto. We've not really replaced it with anything. I don't really understand, particularly in the way we started the game, what the route to goal is.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about recently about Jack Hamilton, what are the chances you need to create for him? Is it headers? Is it getting the ball to his feet in the 6-yard box? Whatever it is. Is it using him? We're not really doing any of that.
Yeah.
It's not a case of we're not creating the right chances. We're not creating any chances. And to a degree, there needs to be some, kind of personal responsibility or whatever, but equally, by the same token, he carried it all himself. I don't know how we're supposed to score goals, basically. I don't see the overarching strategy with this. And it's in multiple places. And I think, really, we were speaking a few weeks ago, we were like, we're in second place in the league. Why do we not feel as pleased as people should if they're in second place in the league? And it's kind of this is why. Because, we weren't very good an awful lot of the time. And we kind of were getting away with it. And to an extent, sometimes that's fine. Sometimes you need to just scrap some points until things work. But I've not really been seeing much of an improvement. And there's too much of it that just doesn't make sense. And I don't, by any means, think that Barry Robson needs to be answerable to anyone, really, actually. Yeah. But I would absolutely love to hear him explain just why he's so wedded to Scott Brown and Ross Matthews.
But equally, though, sorry, Robbie.
On you go, Greg.
No, I was just going to say that points to, for me, a bigger concern as well regarding recruitment and the wider squad building that Robson is undoubtedly a part of, in the sense that you look at the imbalances of the squad last season, which Robson was acutely aware of, given the time he had in the second half of the season to work with the squad. To bring in, to use McMullen as one example. Now, we can only speculate as to the budget impact of bringing in somebody like McMullen might have. But he's a known quantity. You know what you're getting. Now, I don't think there's many Rovers fans would have been up in arms about McMullen signing, or even the fact that he probably is a higher earner. He's a good signing, a good championship player. And yet we continue to not play him to his strengths. He's a Robson signing. And if he's not, that speaks to, I think, more serious problems at the club, in the sense that if we're bringing in players that don't fit a manager's plans that the board have also put in post. And then beyond that, it's... And I'm loath to just go in 2 foot on Robson here, but it's more he is dogmatic about his principles and his beliefs, maybe to a fault. In that, I think if you were to ask him to use your well-trotted line of where are the goals coming from, if you win 3-0 today, how do we get those goals? I'm not convinced he knows, but he's never going to explain that to anybody, and why should he? He's that's close counsel. But it's fundamentally he has a squad of players, but the balance of the squad, for me, it's a bit smoke and mirrors. There was a lot of chat about the cooperation agreement and bringing in players from Rangers. Robson was quoted, again, I wasn't overly enamoured with the quotes at the time, although I understood them, about, listen, it'll fill spaces on the bench and it gives us bodies in training, etc. But actually, if we're not bringing in players to improve the playing squad, what are we doing? And what's Robson doing? And if you are bringing in players, which he has, what's the plan? How are you using them? How are you playing them to their strengths? And that's just, it seems, and listen, it's easy to say after such an abject performance as we saw yesterday, but it feels increasingly like the joined-up thinking just isn't there.
With the personnel aspect, it just felt all over the place yesterday, in the sense that we could see where the weak links glaringly were.
Yeah.
Look, we weren't by any stretch of the imagination going to be rocketing back into the game. But when Lewis Stevenson comes on for Wilson, you see him getting forward with a degree of confidence, competence, and just energy. And that probably gives Paul Hanlon and Dylan Easton also a degree of confidence, in the sense that they know what Stevenson's going to do, where he's going to go, particularly Hanlon builds into that. Similarly with Jean Byrne coming into the middle of the park, as the fans all know, and we've a lot of people asking for it week in, week out. For me, I wouldn't be too upset if we tried to we were talking about Jordan Doherty earlier on, I would actually be quite keen to see him just get moved up to midfield. I had me and Tex Rover continue to have verbal spars and laughter about Doherty as a creative midfielder. Well, I'm not sure I would go that far. If you used him as a number 8 and Byrne as a number 6, then I feel like if you were to go to a 4-2-3-1, you could potentially maybe get more out of Paul McMullen by using him in a wider role. Richard Chin's hopefully going to be back soon enough. And then you can use Easton more centrally with Vaughan or Hamilton or Gentles, whoever you want to use up top, take your pick. But then at least you've got a structure there and you can build from it, and you can potentially use, if you need to use Darrell O'Connor, you can bring him in at the back if you want a bit of pace, if you're happy with handling him for dice, and then you take your pick from the rest of the team. But it just, at the moment, it feels like we're trying to use we've got a system and he's trying to make certain players fit. And he wants to, like you mentioned before, Greg, it's kind of like having your metrics, and Blair mentioned as well about, right, we've got the characteristics that he's got in these players, and he wants to be able to utilise them because they're best suited for that. But I feel like it's the wrong way to go about it. And I feel that going forward, just really need to be having thoughts about where he's at with the squad that he's got and who he's using rather than just sticking. And I know that he's dogmatic, and again, it's his decisions to make. He's the manager. There's a reason that he's on the salary that he's on, and he's been brought in to do that job. But also as a supporter, I think any supporter is well within their rights to be sort of criticising or asking questions to sort of say, because ultimately it's such a trite point to say, but you pay your season ticket money. And I think there's been a noticeable change in the way that the sort of, even yesterday with the sort of numbers, I think that it was the first time that it was quite starkly noticeable, even excluding obviously fans that are maybe elsewhere doing other things. It just felt like it was a bit of a bold change, and obviously quite flat in the South Stand yesterday given the performance. But just give us a reason to believe would be the main thing I would want to say. Give us a reason to sort of turn up to games and think, we can give them a bit of a doing, rather than sort of thinking, we're going to be playing for numbers here with long balls.
This is so to an extent, right? It's a bit like a bairn criticising your driving, where you're like, well, there are things going on you don't even remotely understand. Mm-hmm. You're 7, and I've spent an awful long time learning how to do this. Like, I understand how irate Barry Robson would be listening to this.
Absolutely.
Like, these guys don't have a clue about anything. But I'm going to do it anyway, where it feels like there's too many things where you're looking at it and going, I don't understand the logic here. Mm-hmm. And again, I realise that's on us, effectively. I don't understand this thing. But it makes it very difficult. And I think, the one that's kind of in my mind at the moment is like Ewan Wilson over Lewis Stevenson. Again, you guys talked about this in the pre-match, because it's like, I don't get it. Mm-hmm. I don't get why you'd go for one over the other. Like, so on the other side, it makes sense, right? Because you've got Josh Mullen or you've got J-Rowe. And if you pick either one, like, it then almost follows it makes sense. You go, all right, he's gone for Mullen this week, right? He wants that bit more attack and he wants the crossing ability. So he's gone for Rowe, right? He's looking for the height. He wants someone who's a bit more used to defending. With basically setting everything other than height, or setting height aside, we're like, well, based on the evidence of what I can see, which is only on Saturday afternoons, like, Lewis Stevenson, I think, is better going forward. He's better defending. He's more comfortable at wing back. I think he's more comfortable at left back. Like, I don't understand why he's gone for Wilson. Like, I didn't think Lewis Stevenson was playing badly, and then he dropped out. I don't think Ewan Wilson's playing particularly well, but he's still there. And then we've got the thing in the midfield where, to a certain degree, these things just start running away from themselves. Like, we say it every week, so we say it every week. But there's a kernel of truth in it where we go, well, when Sean Byrne comes on and he puts his foot on the ball and he knocks some passes around, we look better. Mm-hmm. So why don't you want that? Like, why? Yeah. What is it that's stopping you from doing that? And again, we can make guesses about it because we know, because when, I think the most telling thing is that when Byrne has come back in, he's kept the other two, which then goes to Blair's point from midweek about clearly it's what he wants from them is kind of principle. But it's very frustrating to watch, to your point, Robbie. And there's a more overarching point around kind of style of play and all that kind of stuff, and that there's a lot of people who don't enjoy football that's very direct and kind of agricultural, and I completely get that. But it feels like there are ways to do it. If you think about, it's a very kind of trite example, but if you think about that Stoke City side from like 20 years ago, where they were all big lumps, but it was like, we're the big lumps. This is us. Yeah. Hello, we are big. We're here to lump it. Like, and it almost like there was an identity to it, and they got behind it, and because they were getting results, it all bought in. But like, you need to kind of, the whole thing has to come together as a whole, and there's too many parts with this Rovers team where you're like, I didn't get this. I didn't. And again, I totally, completely, cards on the table, I'm stupid. Like, I'm not a football guy. There are things happening that I do not understand most of the time. And, like, I get that. But I've also watched enough football to see a football team and go, that works.
Yeah.
That doesn't.
But as well, yeah, you're absolutely right with the point that you're making. I do fully agree. As you say, I'm sure that Barry Robson would be able to provide you with some explanation. Like if he was given a sort of a sit down interview and it's just like, right, go off and talk and explain. It's kind of like one of those masterclass videos of like he just sits with a tactics board and explains it all. But I think when you can't see the why, you're a bit, you naturally ask the question. And I'm sure I've sort of given a sort of, well, we should do this or do that. But you're a supporter. That's kind of the fun of being a supporter, isn't it? You kind of get to go there and you sit and watch football players who've obviously played football where I've never kicked a ball in my puff. And you kind of sit there and you analyse and you criticise or you sort of make aspersions. But that's just as a fan, you do ask the whys. And I think that's kind of where we're at the moment as a collective fan base. Just he's not answerable to supporters. He's answerable, obviously, to the board of directors, and rightfully so, because otherwise, things would be absolute carnage. And yeah, you've just got to.
It bears repeating as well. Like it's not like a Sunday league team. It's not like the PE teacher in Kids where he just like rocks up by himself and just has it all his own way. Like there are coaches and analysts and all this kind of stuff. It's coming together. Like there is a plan. There is logic. We are just not party to it. But this is the problem when the results don't come. People will question the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like you can look. No, I was going to say you can look stupid as long as you're getting the results. I don't mean that Barry Robson looks stupid, but like, nobody questions the process.
Unexplained route.
Yeah, nobody questions the process when the outcome is fine.
Yeah.
But as soon as the outcome isn't fine, and this is a tangent, and we've gone on too long to really dive into this tangent, but this is also, to go back to last season, this is where stuff like interviews come into play as well. Because, it's a line of players, and he's not here to defend himself, which is my favourite dynamic. But he's like, nobody cares about the interview if you win every week. Like, cool. Are we winning every week? Because that happens very rarely. And so, it does matter what you say and how you explain yourself and how you communicate your ideas. And I'm not going to get us into a real rabbit hole on this, but
which, ironically, speaking about the interview, was actually pretty candid and pretty good. It was good that he just
disagree. Sorry,
no, I'm not having
this
that.
Is, well, sorry, Greg, you can make the point. I've talked long enough.
No, it's more. It's
I suspect it's going to be the same one.
So, I'm paraphrasing him slightly, but it's more the point where he's basically saying, "Oh, I don't know what happened out there. The players kind of got that one wrong." It is the general theme that I've interpreted from him, and it's just that lack of accountability, I suppose. And okay, he's not throwing anybody specific under the bus, but it to me was very much the players didn't really quite do what I was asking of them, and I'm not quite sure why that happened, and I'm not quite sure how we are where we are. You're the manager. It's your job to know why we are where we are. Yeah, so sorry, but I'm just disagreeing.
No, that's absolutely fine. I felt that it was just, obviously it's not great, but it wasn't excusey.
Oh,
yeah. That's the thing. The fear.
I would also say Jim did really, again, kudos to the Rafe TV guys. I think Jim asked a really sort of an important question, which is when you went in at half-time, obviously it's not got a plan. Why? What did you expect going forward? And he kind of sort of says, well, it did work for 5 minutes, which doesn't answer the question as such. But at the same time, I think we've seen a lot worse on that front.
But you're right.
It wasn't
saying, "Oh, this
it wasn't actively bad." I also don't think it was actively good either.
Yeah.
So he did his 4 minutes with Jim, which, as you say, that question's a great question. I don't think many people would have asked that. A question as kind of directly as that. Because you hear people all the time, actually not so much Rovers fans, you tend to see it from supporters of other clubs where it's like, oh, why have they not asked this? How come the manager's getting such an easy ride? That's the question I think you wanted asked. So fair play to Jim for asking it, and fair play to Barry Robson for answering it. But he also, as well as that, there was kind of quotes in the St Johnstone Post that he had as well, which was broadly the same kind of the same kind of gist. What I said in that is like, sometimes you can carry 2 or 3 players, not playing well, but you can't carry 6 or 7. And like, maybe 6 or 7 players out there didn't do the job they were given. Like, maybe our wing-backs are supposed to be starting higher at the park, and maybe our midfielders are supposed to be playing the ball in for them to take on the run. But I'm not that convinced. Like, I don't get me wrong, I don't think very many players played very well at all. But I also, like I said at the start, I don't think they're being given the best platform to do that. And I just think some of the decisions that are being made seem counterproductive or counter. They are contradictory, effectively. Like, we play our wing backs, but then we don't ask them to do wing backy things, and then we're playing a back 3 and relatively conservative wing backs, but then we're playing direct, and we've taken a man out of the midfield or the forward line. Like, why are you doing both of those things? Surely it's one or the other. So it's obviously there's a big week coming up. It would have been a big week anyway, but the Rovers go to Easton Park on Friday in a game that is going to be very mood defining, potentially, for one side of Fife. I think you're looking at, if it's a game, if let's say that game is decided by 2 goals or more either way, I think the losing manager is going to be under significant pressure.
Yeah.
And both of them, I think, even if that is the case, I think you could make a case for why that is maybe almost a little bit unreasonable. Doesn't change the fact I think it will be true.
Mm-hmm. I think even if Barry Robson, and we'll talk about this no doubt in the pre-match podcast, I think even if we win, like, there's still going to be that sort of question getting asked. And again, it comes back to the Barry Robson's PR problem that we sort of spoke about and we continue to discuss on an ongoing basis. Before we wrap things up, I do just want to say, you started to mention so far, great to see Callum Smith back out on the pitch.
Yes, definitely.
100%, yeah.
Callum Smith, I think, is a potentially really interesting one, because when you look at some of the theory behind some of the way that Barry Robson wants to play, he should be actually arguably a better fit than either Jack Hamilton or Lewis Vaughan in terms of the kind of mobility, and like, he's a closer fit to that, what presumably the plan was right at the very start of the season, which is, your forward line is really mobile, really, you're just snapping into the opposition to try and win the ball back. I think he's better suited to that than either of the other two. So it'll be interesting to see to what extent he is used or not. Yesterday, obviously, he was the only striker on the bench. So it's good for him. It means he's got at least a little, whatever it was, 20 minutes. It'll be interesting to see how much more game time he gets between now and January. Because as I say, I think he should actually be a more natural fit. But that, relies on a kind of solid train of logical thinking, which, I don't know, I'm not party to, apparently. Right, I think we should probably leave it there. Thank you, gents, for that. That was, it wasn't enjoyable. I'm quite hit up.
It was awful. Terrible.
But it was a thing that happened. So thank you. Thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully there's a degree of processing that comes from this. There usually is in kind of hindsight, but maybe you're just scunnered after listening to us as well. As we've said, it is a big week. We will be back later in the week, I think provisionally Wednesday night, but we'll soon see, and we'll look at this game in detail and consider the fortunes of our neighbours as well. So we will speak to you then. Goodbye.